Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here. Len May, endo DNA, heat guaranteed when you press in the play.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. I'm super excited to have a great guest with us. It's Dr. Uma Dhanabalan. So maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me here. We've been wanting to do this for quite some time, and what a great day to do this. I am Dr. Uma Dhanabalan. I go by Dr. Uma because my last name is kind of long and people see a bunch of A's and they get a little overwhelmed. And you said it so beautifully, Dhanabalan. I am originally from India. I grew up in Jersey and I'm proud of it. And
I grew up in Philly, so we're neighbors.
My neighbor.
What part of Jersey?
When I first came to this country, we lived in Paterson, New Jersey, and then Clifton, New Jersey, and then Lake Hiawatha, and then I graduated from Livingston High School.
Right.
And I went to Rutgers undergraduate. I did research in Newark. Almost 40 years of my life I spent down there. Mm-hmm. And really, my roots are still there. In fact, I'm heading down to Jersey tomorrow, hopefully for the weekend. But what's really interesting is that I started out knowing I've always wanted to be a doctor from the time I was little. I became a family doctor with going through multiple detours in my life. Went to family medicine residency in Charleston, South Carolina. And after I did my residency in family medicine, I really was very much interested in preventative health. And I really pursued that by coming up to Harvard and did my residency in occupational environmental medicine, which involved doing my master's in public health. And then I did a fellowship in heavy metals. That's my background as far as the world before cannabis. And in 2012 is when I became a blabbermouth to the public about cannabis after my mother died due to an illness known as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. But that's what really got me involved in the cannabis world.
Was there anybody in your family that was in medicine? Like you said, you were born in India. What part of India were you born in, just out of curiosity?
I was born in Bombay, which is North India, but my family is actually from South India. So I was very fortunate. When I came here, I spoke 5 languages. I spoke Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, English, and Tamil, which is my mother tongue, and true English. Now I speak Jersey. I don't even speak English.
I hear you.
But it's we were from North India, and my family being from the South. When we came to this country, we kept with my mother tongue, so I still speak Tamil fluently.
Yeah, I visited a couple of times. I was in Chennai, Bangalore, and Calcutta. So I have a little bit of perspective in India. It's interesting.
Chennai is where my family's from.
Oh, Chennai. Yeah, I spent probably the most time I spent in Chennai. I used to work with this on-site offshore company for a little while. I was overseeing their business development, strategic alliances. So they sent me there so I can meet the team. And I really enjoyed my time there. It was super, super interesting. It's very hard to describe to people what it's like unless you actually go, because the visceral kind of experience that you have is not, I can't describe it. I've been in a lot of countries in the world, but you can't describe India. And it seems to me that when you travel from one place to another, it's like you're traveling to a different country almost within India. It's like the language is different, the people are different. So I found that fascinating too.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. And it's kind of a perfect segue about how we could all be under this continent and in this country called India, and you go 100 miles and you can't speak the language, and you have a different culture, a different experience. And it's sort of like cannabis, right? Because there's so many different cultivars out there, and it affects people differently. And to explain it to somebody is very difficult till you actually go there and see certain things.
Right.
And I love India because it's a melting pot of so many cultures.
Absolutely. So I was asking you a question and I interrupted myself because I have ADD and I tend to do that. And I have squirrel moments every once in a while. But was there anybody in your family that practiced medicine, that they had this background that you kind of try to take on the mantle and get the torch and continue on?
I've been very blessed, to tell you the truth. My grandmother was a shaman. She, looked at people. She knew what to give them. She was the village doctor in India.
Mm.
And recently I lost my uncle,
Mm.
my dad's brother, who was an amazing surgeon, who, coming from a village, became a doctor, and he had been received so many awards. He got his FRC, and he was able to establish one of the first testing programs in India. So I have an uncle that was a doctor, but in my immediate family, my mom was the first woman to get her master's in statistics, and my dad is a chemical engineer, and then also did his degree in MBA and was the director of manufacturing for Menon, and then Menon was bought out by Colgate. So indirectly, I had medicine in my family in different roots.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, you were talking about your healing roots, right? And we talk about traditional medicine as being like pharmaceutical medicine. And I always kind of challenge that. What traditional medicine is medicine that's not pharmaceutical medicine. It's plant medicine,
Love that you
Ayurvedic
say
medicine, all that kind of stuff. So can you expand? I'm just curious again, because you were talking about that, she could see people's conditions and ailments. Well, that's an empathic kind of trait in a way. Can you?
No, I think that she practiced medicine. She looked at somebody. The art of medicine was, what we have to really look at is look at the person.
Yeah.
Look and see. I was taught by really wonderful teachers, and they'd say, "Did you notice which hand his cane was in? Did you notice which side he limped on? Did you notice if he had the handkerchief on his right pocket or his left pocket?" Little things that they would tell us. And it was really interesting. This was the art of medicine that we've lost, because we now look at blood work. We look at people's numbers instead of looking at the person and say, this is what we're doing. But she actually was doing artificial intelligence, because she would scan people from top to bottom. They looked at their eyes, they looked at their tongue, they looked at their hands, they looked at their color of their skin, they looked at their fingers, they looked at these things that gave them what was going on the inside. And that's another thing that I truly love to do as a family doctor, is I get to truly take care of the whole person, and I get to take care of their family members. And that's what she did. She took care of not just one person in the family, she took care of the whole family in the village as well. She helped them get pregnant. She helped them deliver their babies. She cared for their babies. And, I remember the things that she did. She would literally make up the concoctions and rubbing. That's one of the first times when I learned about what we call now as the coding method. She would make tinctures and put it in the baby's belly button. They would make tinctures to put in the ears. They would rub the tinctures. They did these different things. They massaged them. They cradled them. This was art of medicine.
So when you went to medical school and you kind of took that approach yourself, and you were taught all the, quote unquote, Western type of medicines where, my arm hurts, let me give you a shot or a pill for that. Did you already think that you wanted to get into more of an integrative functional type of approach to medicine while you were going through that?
Well, it's interesting, because right after I finished my high school year, I went to school in India for medical school, actually. So I was in Chennai at the Madras Medical College. I was there from 1979 to 1981, when I finally was literally taken out and brought back here, because I went to India. I got malaria. I got hepatitis from the water. So I became a patient in India. And I realized I could not survive to be there if I was going to be the one going to get the illnesses and not be the doctor. But it's a different way. What I realized is that, when I got trained, even as a family medicine doctor in my medical school and all of this, we learned how to look at the person and listen to the patient. We've lost that.
Yeah.
We don't have the time. You know, if the average person goes in a doctor's office, they have 7 minutes. You know, they're looking at a computer, they're looking at your numbers, they're not even looking at you.
Yeah.
You're lucky if they lay a hand on you and listen to your heart and lungs. You know, it's a machine's report that we're reading. So
Yeah.
I still practice what I've learned in the sense that I get to integrate everything. I get to listen to the patient. I get to really play the role of psychiatrist sometimes and just listen.
Yeah.
I don't need to do, but it's understanding that, and you mentioned this, you know, you're doing testing, understanding what the family lineage is and what the predispositions, you know, is there something in the family that I need to be looking out for versus something that might be new that's happening and that you still got to look for those things. I think that medicine is changing and it's really becoming where people have to understand that your doctor is a tool also. They're going to help you to get to the right places, but you got to get educated. You got to understand. The doctor gets to see you at that moment and run their tests, but you know what you're putting in your body. You know what you're listening to. You know what you're reacting to. And that's what we learned. And from my grandmother it was all of that. You know, it was what you ate, what you surrounded yourself with, how you practiced your discipline of your religion and everything else.
Yeah, no, it's so beautifully said. And we always talk about, empowering the individual to have enough information about themselves that they can have a collaborative experience with their healthcare professional. It's not just about you go in. It used to be, and I think during COVID, people started being a little more skeptical about that. It used to be you go see the doctor tells you take 2 of these and call me in a week, and nobody questions it. The doctor knows, here we go, 2 of these. But now, people are starting to question a little bit more. And the more information we ourselves as individuals try to learn about ourselves, we can have a much better experience with a healthcare professional because, the way that I understood it is it's always the healthcare professional, first of all, their job is not to harm anybody. Like you try to look at things that you can do without actually causing harm to anybody. So you say, okay, well, these are the things that are going on. Let me make sure that we address those. And these are kind of these potholes in the road. Let's avoid those things because we know them. But you have to communicate with your healthcare professional on what's going on inside yourself. And I think people stopped doing that for a while. They just started trusting pharma and this is the way it works. But now with this, you've been doing it the whole time. There's a lot of doctors now that are going in and practicing integrated medicine and functional medicine. And it's wonderful to see that, it's expanding, but people need to really understand that they also need to take ownership of themselves. Just because, you're doing something or you have some sort of condition that's causing you pain, discomfort, what are you doing to help yourself? What is your nutrition like? What is your mindset like? All those things are part of it. So, and obviously, your genetics and understanding your sort of where you're coming from, what you inherited, what's going on. So you can kind of control the expression of those. That's really, really important. I'm glad you brought that up as well. What was your sort of journey into plant medicine? How did it happen where, did you always integrate some sort of plant medicine? I'm not only talking about, phytocannabinoids, but other medicines.
Absolutely. It's interesting because our culture came from spices, right? And you say that, when you went to India, you could go to different areas and the food would taste different and it was regional and and anywhere in India, there's that hardiness of the spices when you smell the aroma of the air. And what we always incorporated was plant medicine. We incorporated ginger, we incorporated garlic, there was turmeric, there was cloves, there was cinnamon, there was all of these things that had aromas. Now we call it terpenes, right? That's what we've learned now, that's what we were using. And all of these aromas are terpenes. And each of these aromas evoke something in us. Certain smells take us to a really nice place. Even if I close my eye for a moment, I could think about something and know it could take me to a nice place. And this is where our food it's very interesting because different parts of India did not have refrigeration, right? Different places. And the spices were what kept you from not having any bacteria, antimicrobial. and this is what preserved the food as well. And this is how we consume things, and why didn't people get ill? So that curiosity has always been in my culture. And I lived in an Indian household. My mother cooked Indian food. We always had Indian food. There was always a remedy for this or that my mother would do. We weren't not doled out pills, you know. I still remember turmeric was the, you know, when you had a cold, boil the milk, put the ginger in it, put the turmeric in it, put the honey in it. That was your go-to, you know, for a short throat gargle with these things. This is how we were taught, you know, we didn't take the antibiotics. It wasn't the first go-to, you know, and my mother, I still remember having ear infections, boiling the oil with the pepper and the coconut, the garlic, and straining it off and taking the drops and putting it in, you know, any kind of hair issues, any kind of these, this is how we operated, right? But I knew I wanted to be a doctor, so that's what we did. And cannabinoid medicine actually came into my life as far as my practice because of my mother. And I struggled with the fact that I never got to give it to her, because I was working in Washington State with all my degrees and all my experience, and working as a family doctor, an occupational environmental medicine physician, as a medical review officer. You know, I was popping people for testing positive for this chemical THC. And meanwhile, my mother's dying of an illness known as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. She sees a TV program about how cannabis, they're using ganja, you know, and the curiosity begins in me, but how we keep our mouth shut, you know. This is now 11 plus years of my life that I started to learn about this. And 9 years after my mother's death that I really started getting vocal. And I regret not talking about it. So that became my mission, that I've got to change the stigma. And everybody has to know about the endocannabinoid system. Became my mission, and I do it through education.
So when you said you had to learn yourself, if there are other doctors or healthcare professionals, what would you suggest they do? If they're saying, okay, I listened to Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN and he talked about cannabis is good for this and that. Where do I get more information? What do I do as a healthcare professional to educate myself?
The first thing is to understand that we were not taught about it. So that's the first acknowledgement. Just being aware, you know, behind me, there's a bunch of pieces of papers, and none of those pieces of paper, including Harvard, taught me about the endocannabinoid system. I didn't learn about it there. I learned being curious. So that's what I tell people. Get curious. You know, there's so many more things that we don't know about, but I became curious and I started to learn about the endocannabinoid system, and I realized that this is involved with every other system. And Dr. Uma describes the endocannabinoid system in one word: life. Life. Because it's about homeostasis. It's about balance. If we're not at balance or at ease, we are at dis-ease. So that's the first thing I tell my colleagues and anybody. First, understand that we have an endocannabinoid system. And what it means is that there's something within our own body that works with things known as cannabinoids. And that these cannabinoids can come from plants, and we call that phytocannabinoids. They can come from within our own body. We call that endocannabinoids, or they can be made in a laboratory, and we call those synthetic cannabinoids. So understanding that phytocannabinoids, synthetic cannabinoids, and your own endocannabinoids are working with your body system to help you to be at ease.
So what type of conditions or diseases, as you said it, what would people come to you with, and what would be like sort of the process that you would take them through?
So I am a diplomat in cannabinoid medicine as well as my other degrees. So I take how I look at cannabinoid medicine as a specialty. Just like if you were to say, I've got a broken arm and I need to go see a orthopedic surgeon because they're the ones that are going to fix this, I look at this as patients are coming to me because they're pretty much exhausted their other things, or they found out, Dr. Uma is this doctor that's been talking about cannabis, and she's helping people, and she calls it the exit drug. So let me go find out why she calls it the exit drug, and that's where they come into my life. But what I try to explain to them is that my journey begins with them. This is now my doctor-patient relationship, and that it's a commitment. I'm a doctor, and you mentioned it earlier, that was taught do no harm, but I take it to one more level and I say safety first, do no harm, because I had the opportunity to do all those prescriptions, and now I haven't written an opioid in over 15 years.
Excellent. That's great.
And I could boldly say Dr. Uma Dhanabalan, has nothing to do with this opioid epidemic. In fact, I'm part of the solution for the opioid epidemic and not the problem. And I don't know how many doctors can say that today.
I love that. That's great. That's a great way to put it. And I think, and I love the whole exit drug. And I know that's that's the new thing that people are talking about, cannabis as being the exit drug and stuff. But on the flip side, do you see that phytocannabinoids can be a preventative, like use it maybe?
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. Absolutely. And cannabis, the exit drug, is my registered trademark. So anybody out there listening, I love the fact people are using it. But please give credit, because that's something that I really want people to understand. We give credit in any other type of work, but somehow in the cannabis industry, we're not giving credit for the people that are doing the work. So please remember that. And
I'm not going to call them out right now. I know some people are not calling them out, but you did.
Oh yes, but we're calling them out, Dr. Umas anyway. But bottom line, I actually call it the entrance to a better quality of life. Mm-hmm. That's what I say. Cannabis is an entrance to a better quality of life, and it's an exit drug. Mm-hmm. Because what we have is patients that are coming in with chronic conditions, with a slew full of medications. I used to call it the party pack of 5, and I was a part of it. As a doctor, I called it hypertension, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, reflux, anxiety, or depression. We wrote a pill out day in and day out for that. And now I'm saying, okay, how can I help you lower one pill at a time and get you to be leaner, be fitter, be more engaged, more conscious? Mm-hmm. And cannabis is part of that. It is part of the psychedelic world. It is part of that world that mm-hmm. It helps people do alter their mind so that we can make some conscious efforts. And so I look at this as that the patient walks in, and there's 3 types of patients. Patient 1, never, ever, ever use cannabis naive. Mm-hmm. The patient sort of like a group of patients that my age group. Oh, Dr. Uma, we used it back in the days in high school and college. And, I had to step into this thing called family, get a job, pee in a cup, right. Raise children. And I gave that all up. And now my kids are telling me about it, or my neighbor told me about it. So those are the, prior users. And then there's those that have been self-medicating, and that's what I call them. Self-medicators, not recreational users, because I do not like that word. And if you're going to use that word, let's use it appropriately. Recreate means recreate, rejuvenate, put this part of your mind at ease, and let's think about what you can progress your mind in. Open your minds, open your hearts, and open your doors, is what Dr. Uma says. And that's what we have as our patients that come in. Those are the 3 types of patients that walk in through my door. And depending on what condition and what their goals are, we work with them and I follow them. This is not a mill where you get a card in 5 minutes and walk out and say, oh, you got a card, go out and do your thing. No, I take what I do very, very seriously. And it's a journey. I follow my patients. We work as a team together, because they have to overcome a lot of things. Sometimes they can't even talk to their doctors about it. Their doctors have shut them down. They've been alienated by their doctors. They've been thrown out in many cases. When I first started, many of my patients were on opioids. And I called it the exit drug. And I said, I can help you get off of that drugs. And they would come in from pain clinics and they'd say, I'm done with this. I can't take a poop. I have no quality of life. I keep using more and more. There's nothing more I can do. And I'm not feeling any better. They're not working, you know? And then I have the other extreme of my patients with cancer, where I get to see them one time maybe. And I know that they're going to die and I want them to die with dignity. So that's palliative care. So it's also, as a family doctor, I can now say, I can help you to prevent. And you asked about that, prevent.
Yep.
And I look at 3 words: prevent, maintain, and treat. They come to me now sometimes for treatment, but they've been with me. I can maintain and I can prevent the things from happening. And we're very proud to know it. You know, we're getting people off their insulin. We've lowered their hemoglobin A1Cs. We've lowered them off of all their diabetes medicine, off of all their high blood pressure medicines. And that takes work.
Yeah, it's amazing. I super grateful for you, like taking the stance, because it takes some bravery to be able to do that. And I'm sure that there's other forces that, from a business standpoint, because you're a doctor, you have licenses, you have insurances, you have all these different things that you need to maintain. And because you're an advocate and you're outspoken about this, I'm sure there's a lot of pressures on you from the business standpoint. Has being outspoken and an advocate, has that affected you in some of those ways from a business standpoint too?
Absolutely, because I don't deal with insurance companies. I'm not making the 6 figures because you work as a doctor, but I feel like I am the richest doctor, and I say that so boldly. I am the richest doctor, and I'm very blessed to do what I do. I've helped so many people, starting with myself, to be able to speak so boldly about it. And the loss of my mother is what made me so bold.
Mm-hmm.
So yet that I never got to use it for her, we've made sure that we can get it to patients. And it is difficult. And I do believe you have to be courageous and brave in whatever you do in life. And you got one life to live. And you should do your very best. And it is difficult, but at this point, we have not only changed the world locally,
Mm-hmm.
I've changed the world globally. You know, truly, my message is being heard everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, open your hearts. You don't need to use this medicine, but you know somebody that can benefit from it. Open your minds, because we all have an endocannabinoid system. And as doctor patients, it can open doors to better relationships. As human beings, it opens relationships better with our children, with our partners, in our society. And when I decided to come openly to speak about the endocannabinoid system, I also decided I'm not going to drink anymore. You know, and we have habits. And I remember my days of drinking and having a cigarette as part of, you know, socializing, right? And as a medical doctor, we socialize with alcohol. Every event, every social event, there's alcohol. And those people are getting in a car and getting somewhere else, and they're driving.
Yeah.
And I know they're not completely all there, and maybe some of them are impaired, right? And so I always say safety first, do no harm. And that's for everybody. You know, if you are impaired in any way, shape, or form, don't operate a vehicle or don't do anything that could be harmful to you or anybody else.
For sure. I really think that at medical conventions and events, they should just give out cannabis instead of alcohol. Make it
Well, someday it's going to be that line. You want your drink tickets or your alcohol, you know, or not, you know?
Yeah, it's a drink ticket or your cannabis ticket.
Or something else, you know, whatever it may be, you know.
Absolutely.
psilocybin is coming to the market.
I
And
was going to actually ask you about that. You brought that up. It's a great segue because you mentioned, you know, psychotropic or what is your position on this new kind of venture into psychedelics and psychotropics? I mean, it's not new because it's been around for,
well,
thousands of years, but
well, I think
now
cannabis is, that's what I'm saying. Cannabis is just part of that.
exactly.
It's just helping people. It's a tool in the tool bucket, right?
Mhm.
And if we can find something that won't kill you, why wouldn't you want it? Try it to help you. Why wouldn't we want to incorporate it? And, you know, I'm learning about this now with my patients because my patients are microdosing with psilocybin in addition to cannabis, and I support them and I follow them, and I'm learning how we want to incorporate better lifestyles. Health and wellness is the name of our clinic, Uplifting Health and Wellness. So why not incorporate something? And if they can get off of one pill and, you know, have a better life with their children and get out. I have patients that are very anxious, and with COVID now, they've really, you know, shut themselves down.
Yeah.
And now there are even some fear factors, right? So why wouldn't we help them to be able to get out and socialize and normalize the new normal?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. What is your position on cannabis and COVID? There's so many different kind of articles and studies. You know,
Yeah.
I had Dr. Ethan Russo and Dr. Chris Spooner. We had this whole series about COVID and cannabis. There's all these mixed kind of results. I wanted to kind of ask your opinion. I know you have some thoughts on that too.
You know, it's really interesting because knock wood, we didn't lose one of our patients to COVID, and they were all using their cannabis that was during their time period. And cannabis, and this is why I'm so passionate about it, because it's so counterintuitive, right? Because we think of smoking and inhalation and lung cancer and tobacco and what it does and blah, 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 blah. But when we think about what we are going back to is understanding that cannabis is a bronchodilator. It's a vasodilator, anti-inflammatory. Everything's about inflammation, right? And this is what's really fascinating. Over or under. And remember I said ease, and we started the conversation saying ease. When we're not at ease, we're at dis-ease. That's what happened with COVID. It's an overreaction, over effect. And what we realized is that people that used cannabis, I really believe, prevented the worst aspects of the outcomes of this disease by having this on board as an anti-inflammatory medication that they had, antibacterial, antimicrobial. They used cannabis for the treatment of tuberculosis. They made porridge back in the days. That's what you ate. You know, I'm a big hemp heart pusher. People know I ask, have you hemped it today? You know, are you hemping it? Because it's food. Food is medicine, and cannabis is food and medicine. And that's a Dr. Uma quote. And I say this to people, at least start with eating the hemp, because it's got the nutrients, it's got the nourishment, it's got 21 amino acids, 9 of them are essential, the perfect omega-3, omega-6 ratios. And that's what's important about COVID, is that I really believe, I can't take credit for this. I got to give my brother credit for this, because he's always said this out there, and he's Dr. V.A. Shiva, and he says, you know, boost your immunity, build your community. And that's what we talk about, herd immunity, right? If this many people get vaccinated, it's going to protect the other people that don't. Well, what if we were all healthier? Yeah. What if we could build our immunities up so we were healthy, and that we didn't have comorbidities, and you weren't jacked up on 5 pills a day or more, you know, and that you can improve your quality of life? Why not? And
love that.
And
that's
guess
great.
What?
Yep.
Government has the patent number 6630507. Let's repeat that again. 6630507. issued on October 7th, 2003, and it states cannabinoids
Mhm.
as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant.
Mhm. Yep. So at some point, the government is trying to figure out what can we do to get in this business. I mean, I think they started with finally Epidiolex is at least one, GW Pharma, or now it's Jazz, created this product with a
It's a start.
cannabinoid. Yeah, it's a cannabinoid derived. It's better than the Marinol that they were pushing on us for.
But Marinol's still out there, and people need to know. People, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm so happy you brought that up, because remember I said phytocannabinoid, endocannabinoid, synthetic cannabinoid? Well,
Yep.
guess what Marinol is?
Synthetic THC.
Thank you. And I'm glad, we want people to educate themselves that, this stuff is nothing new. We've just not been told all the truth. And we're doing it today.
Yeah, 100%. Super grateful. All right. So I'm going to ask you questions that I ask all my guests. There's only, I think, 3 questions. And then we'll let everybody know where people can find out more about you or contact you. And actually, before I start that, I had another question that kind of popped in my mind. Do you ever see patients with symptoms of cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome?
I'm so glad you brought that up. I've actually done a whole lecture on it. So when we talk about hyperemesis, let's just define what that means. Hyper means increased, and emesis means puking your brains out.
Yeah.
Okay. Hyperemesis can happen in different people's lives at different times. If you've been pregnant and you had a pregnancy where you puke your brains out for the first 3 months, we call it gravida hyperemesis, which is usually in the first trimester of the pregnancy, and women really struggle in it, and it's very harming at times because they get dehydrated, and it's very uncomfortable, to say the least. Then we have vomiting, if you've ever had food poisoning.
Mhm.
If anybody's ever had food poisoning and you're puking your brains out and pooping at the same time, something went down that didn't suit you right.
Yeah.
And one of my specialties is occupational and environmental medicine, and I did my specialty in heavy metals, and that's been a big concern for me is, are people building up a level of toxicity slowly, and then all of a sudden they end up having these issues. And it comes to what we're learning is that there's also mitochondrial disease. People have not talked enough about this, but people have genetic issues. We're not all the same. That's why it's not the same effect of the same cannabis. Cannabis does not affect the same people. Cannabis does not affect everybody the same. Even the same person can be affected differently with cannabis, because depending on what you're consuming at different times, combinations, interactions, all can have an effect. And hyperemesis, I really believe, is because somebody's got some genetic disorder that we haven't identified, that they've got some type of a mitochondrial issue, that's what's causing a buildup, and or there's contamination in the product, or it's just too much. Too much is just as bad. Like, this is what's amazing. Just as much as cannabis treats nausea and vomiting, it can cause vomiting and nausea and vomiting. So it's that balance, look and see. But I have patients of mine that will tell me that they have developed it after using certain types of cannabis, and I really think it was because of contamination.
Yeah, it may be the case. So Dr. Ethan Russo and us, myself and a few people from my company, we just did a study, and we published that study. It's in PubMed. And you mentioned genetics, and we found a pattern, a genotype pattern that has a lot to do with stress and anxiety associated with that. Also some medication. Also, it's stimulation of the vagus nerve, so metabolic function, CYP450, CYP2C9, and then association with that stimulates a cyclical vomiting syndrome in a way. So Dr. Ethan can summarize this way better than me, but basically, you're absolutely right. There is a correlation. And even outside of this, you got to listen to your body. Sometimes your body's letting you know that you have too much. And this is a signal for you maybe to let your receptors reset themselves, get back to your balance, and then start consuming again. So, I mean, you said it brilliantly. I couldn't have said it better myself, but definitely there is some work to be done on trying to figure it out. But I think we made the first dent. There is an association with quality of cannabis, absolutely, just consumption of an excessive amount, and then also having this genetic predisposition and mixing it with other prescription medication, et cetera. That seems to be the formula for that expressing itself.
I'm glad we're talking about this because I had a case and this was very, very sad. And this is where I talk about the stigma of things, This gentleman, they would test him for a drug test and say, oh, it's because of the weed you're smoking. That's why you got it. He wasn't smoking the weed. He had stopped smoking the cannabis. He had stopped doing everything and he was still having the episode. Finally, I literally called up the ER doctor and they said that man will not be let out of the hospital till a GI doctor called up the GI doctor and said, look, he's got something and it's most likely a mitochondrial, figure it out. And sure enough, he did. They had to make some tweaking in his diet and, making sure they're eating right. So this is where we have to not just blame it on the weed. It can't no more blame it on the weed as the answer to everything.
No, you're right. And most of the things that we see just from doing genetic testing, there is such a correlation between the brain and the gut. So you have something of stress reactivity, cortisol. Now you have a cytokine, overactive immune response. Now, if you have too much cortisol, it starts affecting your gut health, especially if you're prone to IBD and people are walking around with inflammation, gut issues and all that stuff. But it could be all associated with stress reactivity. And if you kind of look to see the balance of those things, as you said, it's everything is together. It's associated. Yep, exactly. All that.
And in fact, I'm giving a lecture, and one of my topic lectures has been your brain, your gut, your ECS, and cannabis.
Yeah, perfect.
Because you're right, your gut is your brain.
Okay. Now I'll get to the questions that I said I was going to get to like 3 questions ago, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. But it's super fascinating. I'm very, very grateful for your time. All right. So I ask these questions of all my guests. First question is, please describe your first experience with cannabis.
Oh God. With my friend Michelle at Parsippany High School, banana rolling papers.
I remember those.
Yes, banana rolling papers and strawberry rolling papers. But
I had banana and chocolate. They were mine favorites.
That's what I remember. Parsippany High School.
What was it? A negative experience where you had a?
I was more afraid of going home because I knew I was going to be in big doo-doo, when I got home because there was going to be trouble. But it's really interesting because my father now attends all my meetings with me and sits in the front row and is very supportive.
Oh, I can relate to that. So my parents, I wrote in my book too, and my parents ended up kicking me out for cannabis use and actually tried to have me arrested. And now my parents actually consume formulations that I created for their aches and so it's the irony of coming full circle. And my dad is very proud of what I do now. So it takes education and time, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm a big music person. You can see I have a bunch of vinyl behind me and all that stuff. So I'm curious about music. This has nothing to do with cannabis, or maybe it is. Do you remember the first concert you attended?
Oh,
or the first album you ever bought, the first piece of music you bought?
One of the first albums I remember is the cover of Boston. It was the guitar upside down, and you'd see the flames coming off of it. That's what kind of comes into my mind as one of my first album covers.
That's cool. So what has cannabis meant in your life?
Cannabis has meant a great opportunity to change the world to me and honor my parents and leave a legacy behind that we must tell the truth and the stigma must change. And my mission is to educate the whole world about the endocannabinoid system. And I'm going to keep on doing it through education.
Love it. I'm there right with you. All right. So last question, bonus question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
My room looked like growing up was very organized. I liked order, and I like to have my friends over.
Were there any posters on the wall or any piece of art, anything that you can reflect on?
I can't remember posters and stuff, but the Partridge Family comes to my mind, as music of that time, and Shirley Partridge and the whole family concept of having family and friends.
Love that. All right. So where can people find you, learn more about you, contact you, social, website, wherever?
I'm very much accessible. I literally pick up my phone, and our office is at 508-444-2324. We are at Uplifting Health and Wellness. I'm located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Our website is upliftinghealthandwellness.com or totalhealthcarethc.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all of those good things. And just shoot us an email at upliftinghealthandwellness@gmail.com. I love to answer questions. I love to speak. So if you have any place that you would like me to come and educate, please contact us.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much. I have to say, I've seen you speak. We've spoke, I think, in the same stages, like I think maybe a cannabis science conference or one of those other ones. You're an amazing speaker. So I encourage people to contact you, and hopefully I will see you soon on the speaking circuit as well. But I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Len. I appreciate you. Thank you for everything that you do. Bye-bye.
Likewise. All right. All the best. Take care.